What is up, Miracle Fighters, and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be doing a deck profile on Max's Neo Nectar Musketeers deck, as requested by a fellow Miracle Fighter, so thank you for the request. In the recent V Clan Collection set, Neo Nectar obtained new support for Musketeers, making the sub-clan more playable as a complete deck. It was actually possible to play a mostly Musketeer deck previously with Cecilia and Martina, but now the new cards not only brings in more Musketeers, but also encourages a more sub-clan focused playstyle, as well as give a different spin on the game plan of the new Musketeers. Following Martina and Torres' return, the other main legion of Neo Nectar, which is Licorice Musketeer Vera, and Saul, following Martina and Torres' return, our other main legion for Neo Nectar, Licorice Musketeers Vera and Saul, has also returned. And once again, their artworks match up in a legion style, I guess. It's pretty cool. So yep, this deck profile will be for the new Licorice Musketeer Vera that you can build from Clan Collection. And without further ado, let's get right into the deck. We'll start first with our main Vanguard, which is Licorice Musketeer Vera. We'll play 4 copies of this. So let's have a look at Vera's effect. Vera's effect is, activated on Vanguard Circle, you may counterblast 1 and retire 2 of your rear guards. Choose 2 cards from the drop zone and put them on the bottom of the deck in any order. Then look at top 5 cards of the deck and call up to 2 cards from among them. Shuffle the deck afterwards, and if you call 2 Musketeers from this ability, Vera gets +1 drive until the end of turn. I see where Bushro is going with this skill. It's a typical Musketeer superior calling skill, given a flavor of Legion. This skill doesn't technically plus to your board because you do need to retire 2 rear guards to call out 2 more, but it pluses through the extra drive, which I'd argue is better in this deck because of Vera's other ability. Musketeers lacking multi-attack also makes this triple drive very important, because it's your only way to make up for the fact that this deck is a 3 attack deck, right? So it's our main way to apply pressure. Being able to return cards from the drop back to the deck also means that you'll be able to recycle triggers and important Musketeers such as Vera's mate, which is Saul. There's really only one way to describe this skill, and that is, it's an amazing deck thinning skill, which I guess Musketeers has always been known for. Deck thinning might be simple, but you have to remember deck thinning is deck winning. Now let's move on to Vera's second ability, which is a continuous ability if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and Saul, which is the grade 2, right, is in your front row rearguard circle. All power increase from your trigger effects applied to Vera is also given to all your front row rearguards. This means that your opponent cannot really guard your Vanguard for a 2 pass and makes trigger assigning easier for you. It basically turns your triggers into front triggers. So, what do I mean? Well, let's have a look at a demonstration, I guess. Okay, let's say earlier this turn you performed Vera's skill to deck thin and call out, maybe a couple of Musketeers, 2 Musketeers, right? So that your Vanguard now has triple drive. Also, Saul is in your front row, and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3. Next, you will attack with your Vanguard first, because that is the most logical way to play Musketeers. The force marker can be anywhere. I'm just putting it there. You attack with your Vanguard first, and now your Vanguard has triple drive, as well as the ability to make your triggers become like front triggers. So, for the first check a critical trigger. Now, if you're playing any deck other than OTT, you'll be thinking about how to split the triggers, stuff like that. But if you're playing this deck and your opponent guards for 2 to pass, you just give the power to Vanguard. No hesitation there, because you know that if you give the power to Vanguard, with your Vanguard second effect, if Saul is in the front row, your whole front row also gets the power effect. Right, so we're going to give the power effect to Vanguard, and maybe we give the crit to Saul. And then second check, oh nice, we got another critical trigger. And If we had bet, if this was any other deck other than Musketeers, if we had bet the first trigger and gave it to the rearguard, we wouldn't be able to, reap the benefits of having checked double trigger. But because of Vera's effect, there's a higher chance that we may be able to get through a 2 to pass from the opponent. Right, so now you can just assign the power to Vanguard and the crit to anywhere else. Maybe you can give the crit to Vanguard now if your opponent got over 2 to pass and their attack hits. And then of course triple drive, third check, nothing. But yeah, with Vera, we don't have to overthink too much when it comes to trigger assigning. And the only thing that we have to assign is the crits to the rear guards and stuff like that. But the power can all be given to the Vanguard. This actually makes the deck more efficient because you don't have to worry about betting power and you can get to use your triggers more effectively. If you're lucky with your drive checks too, let's say you checked, I don't know, like 3 triggers, you give all the power to your Vanguard, you can actually spread 30,000 to your entire front row, which is kind of insane, right? And for that, we have 4 Veras. Now, the drawback of Vera's effect is that it is trigger reliant. Now, if only there was a way to guarantee checking a trigger in this deck, and there actually is, sort of. Here comes in our Legion mate, our Vera's mate, which is Licorice Musketeer Saul, which is one of the most important grade 2s in his deck, right? And we play it at 4 copies. So let's have a look at Saul's effect. Saul's effect is on Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle on place, you may Soul Blast 1 and retire one of your other rearguards, or rather one of your rearguards. You can then look at the top 3 cards of a deck, call up to 1 unique card from among them to Rearguard Circle, and put the rest to the bottom. Here's the interesting part. If you call the trigger unit, you can counter blast 1 and activate all of the trigger effects of the superior called unit. This means that if you called a critical trigger, you can activate the crit effect to give 10k and +1 crit to 1 unit or 2 units. If you called a heal trigger, you can give power and then heal a damage, which is pretty insane. And then if you checked draw trigger, you superior call a draw trigger, you can draw a card and give 10,000 power to 1 unit. What this means is that you're sort of guaranteeing a trigger to go off so that Vera's second ability to give the front row the trigger effect, the power from the trigger effect, can become active. With Saul and Vera, you're basically spreading 10k to your front row pre-battle phase. And then during the battle phase, if you check even more triggers, your columns will become even higher. Saul really increases the ceiling of Vera's power distribution effect, and it is also not a hard once per turn, which means that on your final turn, if you see like a couple of Sauls and stuff, and you have like enough resources, you can actually unleash some pretty nasty high number attacks that more than makes up for this deck's lack of multi-attacks. So even though you're forced to call triggers with Saul, but the payoff is actually more than checking them, I would say, because the power increases more, you get to use their crits, heals, and draws, and yeah, these cards can still boost, which is nice. And they can be used as retire fodder for Vera's next turn effect, and be returned back to the deck with Vera's effect as well. So all in all, you do need 4 copies of Vera and 4 copies of Saul, and they are really what makes this deck pretty strong. They work in tandem with each other to carry out the deck's main win condition. For our backup grade 3 for the deck, we are playing Peony Musketeer Martina, which I showed at the start of the video. Okay. So let's have a look at Martina's effect. So Martina has 2 abilities. The first effect is on Vanguard Circle, Soul Blast 1 and retire a rear guard to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and call 1. It's a very generic effect, but you rarely use this effect because in this deck, your main right target is Vera. You only really want to run into Vera. If you don't see Vera, then the deck doesn't really function that well. Martina's main use in this deck is for her second ability. During the turn that she is placed from the deck, Martina gets plus 5,000 power and plus 1 critical, a mini crit. So even though her power may not be the highest, you can always count on Vera to gain power, and this deck is a force deck. You can always just choose force 1. Then Martina will be 28k 2 crits, pretty strong. So yeah, the most important thing about Martina is her double crit. right? Which helps to up the pressure of this deck, and she's one of the best superior call targets that you have. As for Martina's mate, we have the Peony Musketeer Torre, which are playing at 4 copies as well. Okay, so let's have a look at Torre. Torre is a great call and one of the deck's better right targets as well. Her ability is on place, you may counterblast 1 and retire a rearguard to look at the top 3 cards of the deck and call either 2 Musketeer units or any 1 card from among them. The rest will go to the bottom of the deck. Since our deck is full of Musketeers, as you will see later on, Torre is pretty fantastic because it means the chances that you get to plus to the board is kind of high. Unless, of course, you see a bunch of triggers on the top of the deck, but one of your triggers is a Musketeer. Torre is mainly used either for early rush or to dig through the deck for your powerful and important rearguards like Saul and Martina. It is possible to whiff with Torre, however, so that's a bad side of her. But she is very helpful in early rush, and she also works well with the next grade 2 that we are going to show here, which is our Pansy Musketeer Silver. A core card for Musketeers from the very beginning. So Sylvia, you guys know, has been a core of Neo Nectar, it's been reprinted so many times, and being a Musketeer, she's even more important in this deck. So her ability is very simple. She's just on place on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. You can call a plant token to Rearguard Circle. And plant tokens are basically these cards. Grade 0 with 5k power and have the ability to boost. It's a nice art. So the plant token is mainly used in this deck as a 5k booster body that can aid in early rush, and in later turns be used as retire fodder for your many card skills like Torre and Vera. Both of them need to retire 2 rearguards. Need to retire rearguards in order to activate their abilities, and you generally don't want to retire your useful Musketeer cards, so these cards can be used as retire fodder, and you can then trade them out for better Musketeer units from your deck. 5k while small is still a boost, right? 5k still still makes your opponent have to increase in shield value to guard, and it can really make guarding hard for your opponent in the early game. All in all, Silver just gives free value. It's a free plus to the field, it's a soft plus to the field, but it's a much needed one with all the retiring that we're doing. So yeah, Silver is very important. We're playing it at 3 copies. You can actually play Torre at 3 and Silver at 4. I think it will still work out just fine. But currently we're playing this lineup. Currently Max is playing this lineup. Okay, now we can move on to our grade 1s. We'll start off first with the grade 1 Musketeers. So that's 3 copies of Water Lily Musketeer Ruth, and 3 copies of the Arthurian Musketeer Gaston. So let's have a look at Ruth first. Ruth is one of the new Musketeers that came out in Clan Collection with Vera. So let's have a look at Ruth's effect. On plays on Vanguard Circle, call up to 1 plant token to Rearguard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 1 or greater, call up to 2 instead of 1. Ruth basically rewards you for going second, because if you're going second, you get to get out an additional plant token. And because you're attacking first, if you're going second, the additional plant token can be very helpful in your early game aggro. Ruth is definitely one of the main right targets in this deck. But besides that, if you don't run into Ruth, she still has a very useful second ability, which is on Rearguard Circle. When this unit or your other unit is placed from your deck, you retire Ruth herself, and you can countercharge 1. So with Vera using a CB every turn, and with Saul using a CB to activate trigger effects, and if you want to use Torre, you also use Counterblast. Your Counterblast usage can really rack up quite high. So having a handy countercharge like Ruth really does help in longer games. I personally think Ruth can be maxed out at 4 because it's just such a good right target. And from what I see, most of the time you do actually activate Ruth once or twice in a game, just so you have enough counterblasts for your skills. So yeah, currently Max is playing 3, though I think 4 can also be a good number as well. We do have space for 4. I'll let you guys know what you can remove from the deck later on. But let's have a look at the other Musketeer grade 1. That is Arthurian Musketeer Gaston. Okay, so Gaston's effect is very simple. During the turn that it was placed from the deck, it gets plus 10,000 power. So it's an 18k attacker slash booster. Gaston is a beat stick Musketeer target to superior call from the deck. 18 is really good. It hits a lot of magic numbers, especially with the grade 2s. Most of the time you will have Saul in the front row. So this boosting Saul is a 28k without counting any force markers and stuff. So nothing much to say about it. Free power plus 10k, super good. So we play 3 copies of that. And that basically rounds up all the Musketeers in the deck. We have a total of 25 if I'm not wrong. So I think that's plenty of Musketeer targets for your Vera and your Torre. But we're not done with the grade 1s. We still have 8 more grade 1 slots. And for those, Max is playing the 4 grade 3 searchers, which are the Valkyrie of Reclamation, Pet Mini, and 4 Maiden of Sweet Berries. So we'll first have a look at Pet Mini. I don't think we need to really talk much about Pet Mini. Riding to Vera in this deck is super important. So we max out on Pet Mini to ensure that we get the right ride, which is Vera, all the time. Right. Pet Mini also has a second ability which isn't really that used in this deck. It's during a turn, if you have 2 or more token units, it gets plus 5k. I guess if you're going second and you're right into Ruth and you have Pet Mini in your hand, you can call Pet Mini down and make some pretty absurd grade 1 turn aggro columns. But apart from that, most of the time you don't have 2 or more token units on the field because this deck isn't really a token based deck. But it's still possible to have, you know, a couple of tokens on the field, so the option is always there for her to become a 13k beater. But mainly you use her for the grade 3 search and the shuffle as well, because cards, so even though your grade 3s shuffle after superior calling, your grade 2s like Saul and Torre don't, and most of the time you'll be using your Vera first before you use those 2. So if you happen to, you know, stack too many triggers at the bottom with these 2, just plop down a Pet Mini, check top 5, shuffle your deck for free. I really like this card in this deck. Right, just for the free shuffle, for the grade 3 search, everything. It's a 4-off, I feel. Even though it's not a Musketeer. And then the other grade 1 that Max is playing is the Maiden of Sweet Berry. This is a high value grade 1. On plays on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, call up to 1 plant token to Rearguard Circle, and if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you get a Soul Charge 1. This deck does use Soul for Saul's effect, which you want to be using multiple times, right, to call triggers and stuff. And if you're unlucky, you ride into Martina, at least you have a way to replenish your soul. If you don't rewrite with this deck, which is possible, at least Sweet Berry provides some form of soul charge. Not just that, but the free plant token that she generates. It's just like Sylvia, right? Free plant tokens, why wouldn't you want them? They're good retire foilers and good boosters as well. Sweet Berry also has a second effect, which is during your turn on Rearguard Circle. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, which is most of the game, she gets plus 5k. So 13k booster. Once again, 13k makes magic numbers with your grade 2 attackers. Right. And Maiden of Sweet Berry is just overall a really good card. She's also a decent right target because she can also call plant token on Vanguard Circle. So just a high value Neo Nectar card that can be splashed in many Neo Nectar builds. I personally might remove 1 copy of this for another copy of Ruth, just so I can have more Musketeer targets and also have more counter charge. Because Counter Blast is actually more scarce in this deck, I think, compared to Soul Blast, especially if you want to use Torre, Vera, and Saul multiple times in a game. But yes, this is our normal unit lineup. Even though there are more grade 1 Musketeers that can be played in this deck, but I think Pet Mini and Sweet Berry are just too good to pass up on. And personally, I think this is enough amounts of Musketeers to ensure that you get 2 from Vera most of the time. Anyways, you can recycle Musketeers back into a deck, so I don't think you'll ever run out of Musketeers. But yeah, just to be safe, maybe I'll cut one of these to 1 more Ruth. Oh yeah, totally forgot about the starter. The starter that we are running is of course the Musketeer starter, because if you Soul Blast this out, return it back into the deck, it's another Musketeer target. Right, Broccolini Musketeer Kira, and also I like aesthetically fitting starters for the deck. So it's Kira. Okay. So now let's move on to the triggers. For the trigger lineup, it's very basic. Right, we are running the 8 crits, 4 draws, and 4 heals. There are actually 2 main trigger lineups that you can run for Musketeers. So this is a very basic trigger lineup, which fits this very basic beatdown style deck. So 8 crits, because Vera has triple drive, and then Saul can activate your triggers from the deck. So having high amount of crits means that the chances of you sucking your opponents to death is very high. Right, so you want to max out on our crits. One very important thing to note here is that Max is playing the 4 copies of Night Queen Musketeer Daniel. So this is our only Musketeer named crit, or Musketeer named trigger in V Premium. And you definitely do want 4 copies of this because it's a target that you can call out with Vera to ensure that you get the triple drive. So technically we're not just playing 25 Musketeers, we're playing even more in the trigger lineup. 4 draw triggers, we still value the perfect shield very much against a lot of other decks, high number attackers, right? And checking draws with Saul is actually pretty decent also, to give you an additional card. And with Vera being able to recycle drop zone cards, if you recycle this, you basically have recurring PGs, right? Depending on whether you draw them, of course. But yeah, we do want some draw triggers. And if you're up against like a board white kind of deck, where they just kill off all your rear guards, draw triggers might help you to replenish your hand so that you have enough retire fodder for Vera's effect. And then the 4 heals, 2 heal guardians and 2 20k shield heals. Heals are very good in this deck, especially since you can legion them back. You can reuse them. We only play 2 heal guardians. Heal guardians is really up to you guys. You can play 4, you can play 2, you can play none. But I definitely do recommend at least 2. Right, so this is Neo Nectar's one. Heal Guard is very good. Choose one of Vanguards, gets plus 10k at the end of turn, or you can choose one of your opponent's units and gets -2 crit, as long as you did not ride a grade 3 or greater that fight. So very good early shield. But the 20k has also come up a lot of times for Max to still keep 2 more copies in a deck. Right. And grade 0s can boost, grade 3s can't. Most of the time your front row will be filled up with your better attackers. So sometimes the boost actually does help more than the grade 3 if you want to superior call triggers from the deck with Saul. So this is one example of a trigger lineup that you can play for Musketeers. There's actually another one. Max's one is the more normal one, but the other one is the more spicy one that plays 12 crits. So instead of draw PGs, it's crit sentinels, which you can get from the Asha set. And with Saul able to activate triggers that he calls, and with Vera getting triple drive, the 12 critical Musketeer lineup can actually have a lot of game ending pressure. Because technically with Saul you're getting 4 checks? 4 checks, most of the time you definitely check a crit. If you check multiple crits with multiple power gain onto a whole field, as well as force 2, it can be pretty frightening. So it's really up to personal preference. 12 crits, 8 crits, 4 draws, I think both work pretty decent, right? So now that we have gone through the cards, we're back to the age-old question. Which force marker should we take then if you are playing the deck? Both actually do work, to be honest. So let's talk about Force 1. Force 1 allows your attacks to hit very high numbers, even as high as 40k or more, depending on how many triggers check the Vera and whether you have Saul in the front row. With Saul giving you a chance to pull out criticals straight from the deck in your main phase, if you use Force 1 with that strategy, this deck with high power plus a high chance of checking crits is actually very good. Force 1 with Martina also feels really good because Martina is 13k, you call her out with the ability, she's 18k 2 crits. On a Force 1 circle, she's 28k 2 crits. It's a 20k shield, which if your opponent's not playing this, the 20k heals, is a 2 card guard. Right. However, the same can be argued for Force 2, since you can reach high power with Vera. Force 2 making your 2 crit rearguards 3 crits and allowing you to spread your crits more effectively throughout your board to either damage deny or threaten lethal for all attacks can be just as scary. Personally, if I'm going first and up against a deck that I really need to kill off quick, most of the time I think I will choose Force 2, because if I'm going first, I still have the triple drive on Vera, even though I don't have the front power boost. But the triple drive on Vera means that if I luck suck enough, luck suck hard enough, check enough crits, with Force 2 I can just push the opponents to very high damage. In my opinion, there's really no fixed gift to go into with Musketeers, as both of them do have their own merits. But I guess this really does make the deck more versatile with the gift selection. So you guys can actually experiment to see which gift you all prefer when you're playing Musketeers. Right, so whatever gift you choose is up to what your opponent is playing and how fast you need to kill your opponent. With that, we've come to the end of this deck profile. Alternatives. Merca may be an option. I don't think Rebecca is that worth it anymore. We don't have much Soul, and really the other great ones are more sort of better than Rebecca's already. Merca does have its uses. It can call out plant token, and its power does stack when you recall into its column. So which is possible because let's say you call something to a column, you retire it, and then you call another thing to her same column using either Vera or Taurus effect, right? So she does have its users, but I think the grade 1 slots are kind of fixed. These 4 grade 1s are probably the best grade 1s that you can play with Musketeers. So not much alternatives. This is currently our favorite deck list for Musketeers, if you may, right? So if you guys have any comments, any ways for us to improve this deck, please leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys very soon in the next video. We hope you enjoyed this deck profile. We think Musketeers have a lot of potential, and now Cecilia Reverse is coming soon, so we might see a different Musketeer deck that uses more Cecilia. But as Musketeers fans, Max and I are both very excited for Cecilia Reverse, and can't wait to see Cecilia Reverse's effect in the upcoming V Clan collections. With that, I'll see you guys very soon, and bye guys.